I am Phillippe Bouissou. I'm managing partner and founder of Blue Dots Partners, which is a management consulting firm helping companies grow faster. Catch me on this week's Jesse T Show.
Phillippe, welcome to the Jesse T Show, brother.
Thank you. It's a pleasure being here. Thank you so much.
Man, a pleasure is also mine. I really appreciate you sharing the time with us today, and I'm super excited to hear more about you. So if you could, just give us a little bit of context of who you are and what you do.
Well, I'm from Europe. I'm from France, but I have been living in Silicon Valley for 31 years. And I've always loved software and technology, and I always thought that this was the place to be on the planet. So I moved here back in early 1990, studied a Unix software company, and I've been living happily since then in this wonderful place.
Unbelievable life story that we're going to talk about. So what was it that was the catalyst? Was it after college? Was it, did you go to college? Like what was life like before you left to come to the States and land in Silicon Valley?
Yeah, so I was, educated in France. I went to École Normale Supérieure, which is kind of the MIT equivalent of France, if you will. And I studied physics, and I did my PhD in physics in chaos theory. And, I never really wanted to spend the rest of my life doing research in physics. And the reason is I'm a very people-oriented guy. I like people. I like to interact. I like to meet people and help. And in physics, what you do is you really live in a very deep groove. You're doing research on a very specific topics that maybe 12 or 20 people around the world really understand and spend their life on, but you don't really have a chance to meet people and discover new things. So I knew very early on that I didn't want to spend the rest of my life doing research in physics, and I wanted to do business. So after my PhD, once I finished my PhD, I came across an interesting technology in France. And I told the guy, I said, look, I want the exclusive rights to the technology and I want to start a business in Silicon Valley. And they gave it to me, and they kept a piece of the company. They gave it to me, and I studied a Unix software company based on this technology here. And then I sold it, fairly quickly after to our largest customer. But that's the way I ended up being in Silicon Valley.
What was the lifestyle change like? Because there's some people that come to Silicon Valley. I have some friends in that space and some connections out there, and there's also Austin, Texas is becoming like a little bit of a kind of mecca of itself in terms of technology. But what was it like getting to Silicon Valley as a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed kid from across the pond? And what was that experience like, ingraining yourself in that community?
Yeah, it's a good question. It was actually easy, and you have to understand my background. I'm actually a military brat. My dad, was in the military. We moved every other years. I lived on many, many different places and bases. I was actually born in Germany because he was stationed over there. So to me, moving to a new place where you don't know anyone, you don't know anything, was very familiar. And it was just, to me, it was just another move. And yeah, the language was different, but that was really about the only difference. So I didn't have any problem adapting here. And there's so many foreigners here. There's people from all over the world. So it's very easy to make connections and meet people. And adapting to the valley really was easy for me.
We had a prior conversation to you jumping on the podcast, and you brought up your dad today, but you also brought him up during that conversation. He had a very unique responsibility. Could you share with the world a little bit about what your dad was known for, responsible for at one point of his military career?
Yeah, so my dad joined the army very early on. He went to the West Point equivalent in France. And then at some point, he was in charge of the nuclear for the French army. So he had the key, the president had the other key. So it was a big responsibility for him. And I always asked him, I said, how do you feel about this? He said, well, look, I'm a soldier. If the order is given to me, I execute the order. I don't, it's not my role to question that order. And he was carrying this little box. It was actually quite big. With him all the time, and he had to test it twice a day. So sometimes he would beep in the middle of the night. He would be at random time. And I remember, being on the beach on the southwest of France, and he had this box with him because, again, he had to carry it with him everywhere he went. And they were testing him, and we were in the middle of swimming. It's like, what are you doing with this box? And I felt awkward. But yeah, that was his job, and he did that for a few years. He actually ran also a nuclear base, and it was quite interesting. And yeah, it was interesting.
So just for some context for those that are listening and watching, there's all these Hollywood movies that talk about wartime or any kind of lunch, and you'll see where the president has one key and someone else who's trusted and empowered to have the other key. They have to put them in or put in codes, turn them at the same time. Was this pretty much
Yeah.
his responsibility as well? Like if crap hit the fan and there needed to be some sort of launch, like he would be simultaneously the second person turning that key.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't a physical key. It was actually a box with a keypad. So you have to enter a fairly complicated code, which he never wanted to give to me.
Sure.
I asked him several times. But yeah, you had to punch the code. You have to establish a communication. They would authentify you, make sure you're the right person. So there was a whole process involved, which I don't know the details because he was secretly guarded. But there was a whole process, yes. And only him could do it, and the president on the other hand. And once the two things matched, then you would trigger the attack.
Was there ever any kind of concern for a while growing up, or were you just living your life as a kid? Like, were you concerned that at one point your dad might have to make a judgment call that could affect the world?
I was not, because I always trusted my dad, and I knew he would do it without hesitation. So that never crossed my mind. And so he always said, he said, that's my job. He said, I will execute the order. I trust the president, and that's the decision that he would make. But I don't think he would have had any second thoughts. I just cannot imagine that.